Welcome to Dangerous Wisdom, a journey into mystery and a gateway to the mind of nature and the nature of mind. This is Dr. Nikos, your friendly neighborhood soul doctor. Happy to be with you, my friends, so that we can create a culture of wisdom, love, and beauty together. Auspicious interbeing to you and yours, Koinos Hermes, and a deep bow to Sophia, Cosmic Sophia, of course, and in particular today, especially Gaia Sophia. Today, my friends, very wonderful, wonderful guest. I'm super excited about this. And I'll start by just reading you a little bit about her kind of standard bio, and then I'll just say maybe a little bit more about who I think we have as our special guest today. Cynthia Jurs received Dharmacharya transmission from Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. Dharmacharya is a Dharma teacher, and she became a teacher in his Order of Interbeing in 1994. In 2018, she was made an honorary lama in the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism in recognition of her 30 years of pilgrimage into diverse communities and ecosystems around the world to carry out the Earth Treasure Vase global healing practice. Today, Cynthia is forging a new path of Dharma in service to Gaia that is deeply rooted in the feminine, honoring indigenous cultures and devoted to collective awakening. Cynthia leads meditations, retreats, courses, and pilgrimages to support the emergence of a global community of engaged and embodied sacred activists. You can find her teachings and connect with her global community at www.gaiamandala.net, and we'll have a link in the show notes. That's Gaia like the goddess and mandala like the mandala. You can learn more about her book at www.summonedbytheearth.org. And for those of you on video, there'll be a link, of course, in the show notes, but for those of you on video, here we have Summoned by the Earth. And it's probably reversing it for you. It depends on how Zoom is recording. But I just wanted to appreciate Cynthia as something that we don't have very much of in this culture. We have a mistaken view of, because in our culture, we think that Steve Jobs was a visionary, and we think that Elon Musk is a visionary. And not very long ago, I even saw Neil deGrasse Tyson praising Elon Musk as a visionary. And the wisdom traditions of the world would not agree. Socrates, in fact, in particular, challenged that kind of notion of a visionary. But Cynthia is a real visionary and received a deep visionary practice of life. And I just so honored to be able to speak with you about this journey, because especially at a time we've had, those of you who listen regularly know I criticize people who hop on airplanes and go to Bali to have a nice healing experience. We don't have too many spiritual pilgrims who are really doing hard work, walking a hard road, and bringing to life that deep, profound practice of pilgrimage and that practice of unknowing that Cynthia's book is all about. So Cynthia, welcome to Dangerous Wisdom, my Dharma sister, my wisdom sister.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you and have the chance to talk with you today. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I know you have to tell this part of the story a lot, and so, but we just gotta at least lay this context for people who haven't read the book. You had the kind of almost caricatured archetypal experience of climbing into the mountains and meeting the wise old man in the cave.
Yeah,
Can you tell us that story? And that's quite some time ago now. That takes us back, doesn't it?
it
Last
does.
century.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an amazing opportunity, that doesn't come around every lifetime. And this was in 1990. I was invited to go and meet the old wise man in the cave. I mean, I didn't even realize quite at the time what I was entering into, but I knew I had to go. And I was told at the time he was 106 years old and he was living in a remote part of Nepal, um, in this cave hermitage. And just to say, I found out as the book was coming to completion that, in fact, he may not have been 106. But I was quite surprised about that actually, because that was the convincing story that I was told at the time. Needless to say, it doesn't really matter, exactly how old he was. He was very old and he was um, proverbial, literally. And it was just this archetypal moment, which actually has continued throughout my life in some amazing ways. But walking up the trail to this very remote cave to meet this old lama, I realized that I could ask him a question. And, what was I going to ask him? I hadn't prepared myself with the question to start with. It just, I just realized, oh, this is the moment. And I need to come up with a pretty good question. And so I was stumbling along with my heart open, but with really, like not knowing anything at all about what to do in this situation. And I actually then landed on the guiding question of my life, which again I didn't fully realize was the guiding question until I landed it. And how I was reflecting in anticipation of this conversation, how that question has stayed alive for me all these years. It is the question of our times. And the question was, what can we do to bring healing and protection to the earth? And I was possessed, with asking that and with carrying out the answer, which is what I've been doing these last 30 plus years. It took a while of being with him and living there before I had the chance to ask the question. But when I met with him, he asked me, what is it like where you live? And I told him some things. And I told him about one of my concerns and motivations in asking the question is the production of nuclear weapons at the Los Alamos National Laboratory across from where I live in New Mexico, and the poisoning of the earth through the radioactive waste that is coming off that industry. And anyway, he told me that I should get these earth treasure vases and put them in the ground and that they would do that work. And I really had no idea, once again, what he was even referring to, much less how a little clay pot filled with prayers and symbolic offerings could affect the kinds of healing that is called for in the world, all around the world, and within the web of life. And so, but I also felt as if this is what was coming to me, and the changes and the healing that is called for is so vast that we have to try everything, and we have to approach it from many different levels. And so, okay, where do I get them, and what do we do? And let's try everything. So that's how it started.
It's a strange thing to hear. You got to get these treasure vases. And I'm sure for a lot of listeners, this is very much outside the realm of their kind of philosophical experience. But this relates to the Buddhist tradition in particular, and a particular figure who is known for many kinds of treasure plantings, right? The Terma tradition and the Tertons. And so, could you maybe say a little bit about that? I mean, this is I mean, it's such a remarkable thing. A person from the dominant culture actually climbs a mountain, meets an old man in a cave, and then this is the particular thing to be told, first of all, that if you just practice where you are,
Yes.
that you can do so much good. So that's beautiful that you okay, we can because not we all don't have to go to Nepal now. Cynthia
Mm.
already saved us the trip, but that part of the message was just do good right there. Be
Yes.
rooted in the place. And but then if you want to, because we have so much karma to make up for, maybe we need people to do a little bit more and we have to connect to our symbolic life.
Mhm.
And but maybe can you say a little bit about what a treasure vase is? What is this idea? Where does it come from?
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for mentioning that instruction that he gave me as well, which was that even just one person can bring benefit to the whole area around where they live, you know, and certainly that was true of him, you know. Um, and many of us have had the experience of meeting someone who affects our lives for the better, you know, and so let's live in such a way. But he said, but you need to get those earth treasure vases and you need to put them in the ground. And my rational mind was stopped in its tracks. But nevertheless, I did receive them. And so this is a tradition that comes out of the Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana tradition. Going all the way back to the 8th century in Tibet with a historical figure named Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, who is the one responsible for bringing Buddhism from India to Tibet and kind of seeding that um, Dharma in that land. And he's known as a great master who revealed many, many, many teachings in the course of his life, and had a group of disciples around him and all of that. And his primary consort Yeshe Sogyal was very much with him, and together he would reveal these teachings, and then some of them really were intended for future times, like they weren't necessarily applicable at the time that he was alive. And so they hid them. And they hid them in different ways. And some of them were kind of um, actually literally placed in the earth or underwater or in different circumstances, and some of them were hidden literally in the mind streams of his close disciples. And then it's said that later on, in future lives, these other great masters would reveal these teachings at the time when they were needed. And some of them were um, like scrolls that were hidden in caves, way up in the mountains, or statues under the water, and they would go and pick one out or something like that. But some of them would come through. I suppose it's a little bit like channeling. I've never heard a lama say that, but I've wondered myself about that. Anyway, they would in these later times come through in deep practice experiences or dreams or things like that. And so the practice of the earth treasure vases is one of those. It's called a terma. These are revealed treasures. And those who discover the terma are called tertan. And so the practice of the earth treasure vase was revealed again in, I think it was the um, industrial age. And it started to come forward when there started to be this kind of degradation of the planet. And in more recent times, many lineages of Tibetan Buddhism have um, taken these little clay pots and put them out in places that need to be protected and bring healing. And they say that the vase is, well, so it's a clay pot, and it's crafted in such a way that then it's filled with offerings. Normally, the lamas would make all those offerings very particular ways. And they would be offerings that are symbolic of protection, of healing, of bringing enhancement to the land and prosperity and balance in the web of life. And they have very particular things that they would offer. And then once they're filled, they're sealed, and then they're consecrated, and then they're taken out into the land and literally buried or planted in the earth to for those prayers and those energies to radiate out into the ground. And but in our case, they were given to us in a little bit of a different way, which was really quite radical on the part of the lamas, because I think they recognized the dire circumstances that we're in and what my motivation was. And they also were concerned about customs and security, when such a thing travels around the world, halfway around the world to get from there to here. They're never supposed to be opened once they're sealed. So instead of filling them for us, they put the sort of very most sacred substances into the clay itself. And then the pots were made from that clay. And these are relics and incredibly potent medicines that were gathered, connected to all of the great lamas and lineage masters of that tradition. And so it was really quite amazing, all that went into the clay. And then they were given to us empty. I mean, it wasn't like they were really empty, but they were empty pots. And then it was up to us to then fill them and seal them and take them around the world and bury them in places where healing is called for. So I was very overwhelmed by the assignment in the beginning because it was completely overwhelming. And literally the lamas, they kind of just said, well, just put them in the ground, they'll do the work. And I thought, well, that can't be, how is that? And how what are we supposed to do? I thought I had to, the Tibetan tradition is filled with instructions around, 3-year retreats and accumulating hundreds and hundreds of thousands of mantras and, jumping through a lot of hoops, which I did. But it was like over my head. But at a certain point, the earth herself began to speak, and the fires and droughts and floods and everything we have going on in the world then, and of course now, began to speak louder and louder. And it was like, well, okay, we have these, we need to start working with them, and it was funny because the lamas really weren't all that interested in this practice. It's sort of like, oh yeah, well, there's that, but really you should be doing this. And I kept feeling like, actually, no, this is it. This is what's important today. There's a reason this practice has come out in these times. And so I had to sort of find my own way in a certain way. So that's kind of the background.
Hmm. It's quite remarkable that we continue to have to have this inquiry into pattern maintenance and pattern transcendence. And in every cultural, and also in our own person, there are forces, every cultural institution, every culture in general, there are energies of pattern transcendence and there are energies of pattern maintenance, and there have to be, right, this balance. And so it's so fascinating that you had to continually confront that within the Buddhist traditions, energies of pattern maintenance. And yet, at the same time, if it hadn't been for the pattern maintenance energies, the journey couldn't have happened. And at the same time, it was their responsiveness even though there were all these times when you were also confronting, okay, but no, but now you're hitting the maintenance part, you know. So we give you the transcendence. Here you are. You're not a lineage holder. We no one, but go ahead, do the treasure vases. So he just hands this off to a woman to go do this thing, right? When you have certain kind of we use the word patriarchal almost too much these days, but you have a kind of, you know, male dominated energy, and that's part of the pattern maintenance part that we need to push against. And then they quickly also even adapted the vases themselves. Oh, well, they're supposed to be sealed, but the responsiveness was paradoxically there almost, you know, because we're facing this difficulty. We know we can't just leap into chaos, that there's something in these traditions that we need, and we never know what is it that we have to take extra good care of. And yet there are problems. We have to evolve, we have to grow. And so it's such a beautiful thing that there you are, right where the wound and the gift are together, right? And we're having to find our way. And so you get these vases, and then sensing that it's such a big task, they sat for a while.
Mhm.
They just
Yeah,
went in the
I
closet.
literally put them in the closet. It was
In
like,
the closet.
"Eh, I don't know. I don't know about this." But,
Yes.
I couldn't ignore it.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. So your spirituality for a little bit was in the closet because you had to come out as the visionary that you are. It's not an easy thing. And we see that again and again, that when we have these visionary impulses, the ego likes to shut them down. You also confront in the book that the ego likes to assert its impulses as inspirations, and that it's not always easy to sit and not do
Mm,
because we get the good idea and then we want to do it. We can maybe get to that. One of the
mm,
things that I think is so amazing about this project is the way it transcends a lot of different boundaries, because I work with creatives a lot. If you had been trained as an artist, you would have called this an art project. And
mhm,
it's in the vibe of the ecological art projects that I help people to think through.
mm,
And you face then a lot of the questions. And so, hello, creatives. I know some of you are going to be listening because when we teach the courses, we're going to be telling people to come. You've got to listen to Cynthia. You've got to read her book.
mm,
And
mm,
again, I want to say, people, this is a really good book. It's a spiritual adventure story. It's kind of like the Odyssey, but Ithaca is the earth, and Odysseus is a woman, and she takes a grand adventure to all these different places.
mm,
Okay, so maybe what we could do though is go into detail. One of the things that I was so struck about this, about its visionary aspect and how this becomes a healing, because so often as part of the self-help catastrophe, we go someplace to get the healing. We don't realize that we've used a whole lot of resources to get there because you don't see it. You just get on an airplane. You don't see that there's extraction that is involved and that there's this whole intervention into the world that has to happen to get on a plane. And
mhm,
then we go use somebody else's resources. Then we have our big ayahuasca enlightenment, and we go back home and we think we've been healed. But not much has happened except extraction at the other end, and maybe we gave people some money or something. So this kind of real pilgrimage is so different because of the rippling out of healing and awareness and compassion. So I thought maybe we could just highlight one of the profound stories. There are so many wonderful stories. I mean, we could talk. We could have many episodes, but I thought the General Leopard story. Do you think that would be a good one to kind of talk about in some detail because of how moving
Yes,
that was?
it's a very powerful story, and it's a very tangible story. Some
Yeah.
of the effects of taking the treasure vases around the world are a little more subtle.
Yes.
This is a very in your face kind of example of
Yes,
what can
and let's, in case anybody's confused, then just to just summarize. So this is an ancient teaching that was hidden. It reemerged. Padmasambhava's like back around 800. It reemerged. You get handed the assignment. No, you can go do it. It sits for a while, but then you do get the idea, okay, it's time to do this. And there's a lot of spiritual work. Maybe even we should say a little bit about that. Let's maybe talk about the kind of spiritual work that goes before you get to Liberia. You can
Mm,
lead us through some of what is involved and what you realize you have to do, and
mm.
then the taking of the vase to Liberia. Does that sound like
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, I mean, so as we said, I set them aside. I did some of my own deep Dharma work and practice and kind of laid the ground, and then realized we have to start doing this. I mean, who cares that we don't even know what we're doing, but we have to try. And so we started to pull them out. And the place that I wanted to begin really was up above Los Alamos National Laboratory, because of what it represents, and the deep core wound that place and everything that it is all about and what it's doing to the earth is, you know, is doing. So we were amazed to find an incredible location not far from the lab, and went there with a Native American woman who blessing of the land, and some Tibetan monks from Dharamsala who happened to be around, who knew about the practice, who accompanied us, and we started there in a place that definitely was calling, and was part of the initial motivation, as I said. And then what struck me was the whole notion of the bioregion, which is that, I always have trouble with political boundaries because, and maps and the world, the way that it's all set up, because, it's so artificial and it's all about politics and it has nothing to do with the land. And really, a bioregion is defined by the river system mainly that runs through that particular area, which, regardless of political boundaries, is affecting this, this whole region. So we looked upon the land as a bioregion here in northern New Mexico, the Rio Grande bioregion. The river is the Great River, once Great River, I should say, and its source is in southern Colorado, in Creede, Colorado. And sources of rivers are supposed to be very good as locations for the treasure vases, because they, it says, like, the way the prayer flags carry the wind carries the prayers, the river will carry the prayers of the treasure vase that's buried nearby. So we took one to the source of the Rio Grande, and then we took one to the mouth of the Rio Grande, which is all the way at the southern tip of Texas, where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And so those two locations, north and south, and then on top of the two highest mountains to the east and west, because mountaintops are also powerful spots for these little clay pots. So we had the center and the four directions here, and that was the beginning of the mandala, because in its most simple form, the mandala is just that, it's the center and the four directions. The five Buddha families are often worked within the Buddhist tradition. There's a whole teaching I could give on them. It's a fascinating philosophical and experiential way of practicing to come into wholeness oneself. But also, what happened for me is realizing that I could apply those teachings to a region, to the whole region, and to the whole earth, really, because eventually what started happening is that the vases started going out from here, from this central mandala, to all over the place. And nowadays, I mean, I'll just jump ahead all these years, we have what we call a global healing mandala all around the whole planet, with close to 100 treasure vases buried in the earth. So that's how it began. And they started then to go out in different ways. And again, I was overwhelmed with the assignment. I didn't know how to determine where they should go. And, you sort of try to think, okay, well, we have to have them here, here, and here. But it's so far beyond that. We realized that they're needed everywhere. Everywhere you turn, there's something going on in whatever way it is. There's issues everywhere that are in need of restoration and healing and balance and harmony and all of those things. So it became a very kind of spontaneous, organic process of just listening deeply and listening for where we were called, and also where the vases themselves were calling us, because it really started to feel like we were working with like a living being. You know, once a little clay pot start to get filled with these prayers and offerings that people would bring and pour into them from their hearts, like everywhere I went, I realized people care about their land. They care about their communities. They care about the rivers and the trees and the, you know, end of war and whatever it is, you know, that is happening. The animals. I mean, you know, you can kind of go on and everyone everyone cares. And so the treasure vase becomes a receptacle to receive that which is really the most important thing in the world, which is our love and our caring and our compassion. And so we offer it, not necessarily knowing what the outcome will be. And the practice is all about getting our own ideas out of the way so that we can be a vessel ourselves, actually, you know, and pour our hearts out into the world and contribute, participate in the creativity of the beautiful nature of life on earth, of which we are each a part. So anyway, I'm sort of jumping around and stuff, but it went out from you know, it went out from here, from this bioregion, and started to go around the world. And I did many of them in the beginning, but I also had a community, a sangha of people who were coming here and working with them, or saying, you know, what about this location or what about that location, and um, and so they went out. And at a certain point, you know, I would, well, I would go on these amazing pilgrimages and come back and kind of go into retreat and literally spin the globe looking at where in the world are these supposed to go. And at a certain point I realized I was going to have to go to Africa, and I didn't really know how that would go, as Africa is obviously a very big place, and where do you even begin there, you know, and how would this be received there? Um, so if you're ready, I'll go into the story about what happened in Liberia. Would you like me to do that?
That sounds beautiful. And I just want to emphasize a couple of things in the story as you told it so far, and just for people who may not have a clear picture, that there's a very, very important role for what we would call the meditative mind. That through this process, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but what I sense in the book is what I sense in my own life, that we begin to see that meditation is essentially part of the structure of experience. And the question is only not if we're meditating, but just how well. And so to be able to sense what needs to be done and what is just an idea from the ego, to be able to sense where the vase goes and where it doesn't want to go, to be able to sense its aliveness because it's been made through a ritual process. So
Mm.
it itself is an art object, but that kind of art object that has drawn the sacred to it, not something as a matter of self-expression, which is it's just a lot of what art gets constrained to in the dominant culture, which weakens it. But here it becomes something that calls the sacred powers and inconceivable causes into it. And
Yes.
then it becomes alive because we are those sacred powers and inconceivable causes. So you meditated frequently. You had a monthly full moon meditation, and people were really bringing clarity of mind along with that compassionate heart, what the Buddhists call bodhicitta, the
Mm.
awakening mind and heart. And
Mhm.
all of that is guiding this. So it's, again, not something so easy peasy, but that really demands a lot from us to become that vessel. What am I putting in myself? Am I putting in the intention into my own life and clear mind and peace and love? And am I radiating it out? So
Mhm.
all this, I think, is just so important. So then there's even a part of us that might want to say, well, there are some places I don't want to go, but to go to the places that scare us, to walk the difficult road. And the
Mhm.
road was often very challenging for you.
Yes.
physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so then, okay, Liberia, because you went to other places in Africa, and there those stories are important. I encourage again, read this book, everybody. But this is a wonderful story, so please take us there.
Yeah, well, thank you for all of that because that's exactly right. You know, the treasure vases also were filled with these offerings, you know, and it was like a kind of alchemy. It is. It's and the importance of offerings to form a relationship to the earth and to then have that reciprocity in, you know, where it's like you give everything you can and then the answers come and the guidance comes and the process of that we learn in meditation is to get over ourselves, you know. Like it's not all about me, and that's the difficult process of transformation, really. But anyway, so yes, there were some very challenging parts to all of this, and Liberia was one of them. You know, I was invited to meet peace builders from Liberia through an organization called Everyday Gandhis that was doing work in Liberia post Civil War. There was a 14-year-long civil war there. Liberia is a very small country in West Africa that um, has a lot of troubles. It was founded by freed slaves from America who went back to Africa and, you know, landed there and um, started the country in a official way. Of course, it was already there. But in any case, so there was this horrible civil war, and I was invited to bring a treasure vase as a ceremonial experience for the people who were both Americans and Liberians working together to bring peace to that land. And the treasure vase was filled with some of the most powerful prayers I ever heard for peace. And these were from people who, you know, had lived through the horrors of war. And so I realized, okay, you know, I got to go to Liberia and take this there because it's filled with all these prayers and it's not going to go somewhere else. It has to go there. And I had a dream actually that the pathway to peace in Liberia was through the Dogon people in Mali. This is another really ancient culture that is a fascinating culture. I guess I'll leave that story for another time, really. But I met a Dogon elder who was a diviner who deeply touched me, and I write about him in the book. And he he blessed the vase for Liberia and told me that these treasure vases would do what they need to do. You know, I was concerned. I was very concerned at that time about this sense of urgency that I felt about getting these in the ground. You know, and um, I was just possessed by that. And he showed me that urgency is a quality that doesn't really help. That when we get caught in that sense of, you know, trying so hard, we're actually just contributing to the problem. So I've learned a lot from elders in different cultures around the world, and that was one of them, really important one. But I went to Liberia
Was it
and
before you went to Liberia that you met Christian?
I met him in California when I
Right.
was asked by the Everyday Gandhis to bring the
That's what I
vase.
thought. Right. So, and
Yeah.
that's when he first approached you and said, maybe you should teach me meditation.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I rang the bell every time I do something, you know, I begin and end a period of meditation with the sound of the bell. Um, thanks to Thich Nhat Hanh. And I rang the bell and took us into this meditation, and then the vase went around the circle and we closed with the sound of the bell again, and it was a beautiful event. And afterwards I was outside and this gentleman approached me and he was kind of intimidating, really, in his demeanor. But he asked me if I would teach him how to meditate, and I probably laughed right in his face. I just couldn't believe he was serious. And but he was very engaging, and it turned out that he had been known as General Leopard. He was a career army guy from Liberia who had joined the army when he was 18. He would been serving in different ways for many, many years, and he was probably 50 at that time. And he had been trained in Libya and Romania and all these fearsome places. And he it's a long story, but he was part of President Samuel Doe's special forces, and he was then assassinated. And this gentleman, his name is Christian Wolo Bethelson, he escaped and joined the rebel forces in the north of Liberia to fight against Charles Taylor and another leader named Prince Johnson. Anyway, he became known as General Leopard during that time, and commanded, thousands of forces. And so that was his life. Okay, so the war ended. Eventually, the war ended thanks to the women of Liberia who stopped the war. Great story there too. But all these ex-combatants had to put down their weapons. That was the only thing he knew how to do, is to fight. And so he was out of work. He was totally, a lot of PTSD, let's say, and he didn't really know what to do. So he was offering his services as a mercenary or going to offer his services as a mercenary in Ivory Coast. And his car broke down on this really terrible road that I've been on many times now, in the same location that the Everyday Gandhi's car had also broken down, and they met, by accident. And he introduced himself, and they invited him to come and become a peace builder right then and there. And he did. It was like, he was ready for a change. And so he started to learn the ways of peace building. And I met him not too long after that. And he saw me meditate, and he was like, "What is this?" And I want to learn. I need this. And so when I went back to Liberia, he was there, or when I went there with the treasure vase to bring it, he was there, and he was part of the team that helped me to do that. And it's an incredible story of how the vase was actually buried, because the women, the community needed to determine whether it was accepted by the ancestors. They weren't just going to, take it on faith. They had to know from the source. And so, I had to just like completely let go and offer it and say, I'm bringing this as a gesture, but it's up to you, and whatever you want to do. And it was people from 3 countries in that bioregion. Actually, it was a river system connecting Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And they were all affected by the war, and they all came to put their prayers into this treasure vase because of how important it is to maintain peace. And so the women diviners went into trance, and in the course of their ceremonies, the one of the ancestors came through and said, yes, this is something that they should do, and that it would be very good for the community and for the land. And so this amazing ceremony was created, and I think it was probably about 500 people came to that closing ceremony, and they all put their prayers into that treasure vase and their offerings, and they had nothing, and they put everything they had into it. And so then we took the vase long story short, we took the vase to the village that had been the village of the ancestor who spoke, um, that was going to have been a cultural center before the war started, to really celebrate the cultures of the region. And it didn't happen because of the war. So that's where they decided to bury the vase. And the vase went in the ground. And after it went in the ground, the elders said, well, now what? We want to remember these prayers. This was really important to us. And I said, well, that's not for me to decide. This is your land and your community and your place. And what do how do you want to remember them? And it was Christian Bethelson who suggested building a peace hut in that village, which is a traditional structure where people go to resolve conflict in the villages. And it's used to be all over, every village had one. And they're round structures. There's no hierarchy there, although it is a place where the elders and the wise ones go and, help to keep the peace. So our nonprofit organization raised the money to build a peace hut. And so that took me back to Liberia, and I've been back several more times since then. And out of that, a peace building program was developed through Bethelson and his colleague Harper Carmen, and a woman who's sadly passed away, Annie Nushin, who was one of the women in the peace movement, so important to Liberia. And they began to teach peace building under the peace huts, and we've now got 5 peace huts all over Liberia in this like ongoing peace building program. However, it never would have really happened if I hadn't finally succumbed to Bethelson's, pleading with me to teach him how to meditate. And so, we began to work together individually. And he took to the practice like a fish to water. It was incredible to witness. I mean, really, it's one of the most moving things I've ever gone through with anybody, is witnessing his transformation. And at a certain point, I introduced him to Thich Nhat Hanh before Thich Nhat Hanh had his stroke. So he actually got to receive teachings from Thai, and was offered a scholarship, as were Annie and Harper, to come to Plum Village. Bethelson ended up living there off and on for 3 years. This is Thich Nhat Hanh's community in France. So it was he called Plum Village heaven on earth, coming out of the conflict region that Liberia was and is in many ways. Going there and living there, he had a refuge like nowhere else on the planet, and it facilitated his transformation. And then he came here, we did retreats. I taught him what I could, and then he and his team began to share the practice of mindfulness and the sound of the bell with their communities where these peace huts were then being built. And it was just an amazing thing to watch how all of this started to take root. And he now says, and I mean, this is a while back now, but he will never ever ever pick up a gun again. It's like that part of his life is over. And he has dedicated himself to the transformation of war and the bringing of peace. So I he loves working with young people. Unfortunately, Liberia is not a stable place, and so there have been, this was over a decade ago that all of this started. And we're now seeking immigration for him and Harper and their families to go to Canada, because it's not stable in Liberia. And we'll see how all of that goes, but we're wondering, we're hoping and wondering. And meanwhile, the work of peace building is still going on, and many, many people have been, affected by the practices that we shared and still do. He also went on the radio. There was a radio show for a long time during. You remember that there was a Ebola outbreak. This was before COVID. Ebola broke out in Liberia and was very devastating. Killed thousands of people, and so they couldn't travel. And so they started a radio program which was called Conversations Under the Peace Hut, because these peace huts are all over the country. So they would have those same kinds of conversations under the peace huts, but on the radio. And that was a very effective way of reaching a lot of people as well. So he's, been through a tremendous amount, and there's lots more I could say, but that's sort of in the nutshell what happened there. And I feel like he's really one of my great teachers in this life.
It's
Yeah.
a beautiful story, and one of the wonderful things about it is that there was an enemy soldier who killed 5 of his family members. And
Hmm.
he swore, as General Leopard, he
Yeah.
swore that he was going to take vengeance and kill this man.
Yeah.
And then he ends up making peace, and they become friends.
Oh God, it was an incredible story. Yeah, this was during the war. They'd known each other, and then this other gentleman was told to kill everybody in this one region. It was Bethelson's home region, and so 5 members of his family were killed. And um, after the war, Bethelson was like, I'm gonna, you're gonna get it." And so this guy whose name is Harry, he was known as Green during the war, but his name is Harry Weeks. He went and left and moved to Sierra Leone to save his life from Bethelson, and Bethelson was super threatening, and he meant it, and the guy wasn't safe, and so. But then when Bethelson went to Plum Village, he heard Thich Nhat Hanh give a talk, and he realized he had to forgive him. He had to forgive Green. And so he called Green's wife and said, "I'm ready to forgive your husband." And they didn't believe him. But when he went back to Liberia, he invited Green to come and meet with him under one of the peace huts. And Green was so tired of living in Sierra Leone that he came, and he just went, "Okay, yeah, we'll see what happens," you know. And he was blown away by the fact that it was real. And they did a reconciliation ceremony that Annie and Harper facilitated for Bethelson and Green. And they cried, they shared, they spoke their truths, and they forgave each other. And they did it publicly. And that led to other ceremonies that needed to happen to ask forgiveness of things that Bethelson had done during the war, and other people who had terrible experiences during the war. And then Green learned about the work of peace building that we were doing and offered to be a part of it, you know. And then that never actually had a chance quite, but I'm hoping maybe someday it will. Green went and ended up getting a job as a nurse in one of the hospitals, and at a certain Bethelson has high blood pressure, and he was rushed to the hospital by Harper one time at one point, and um, the person who checked him in was Green, and he had to pay to be, to go to the hospital. And Bethelson didn't have the money. And so Green paid for him and took him in and like administered what was life saving to Bethelson.
It's
And yeah.
it's just a beautiful story. I mean, to be able to forgive something like that, and when we look around and we've seen that Africa has demonstrated this, of course, South Africa too, and Truth and Reconciliation commissions throughout the continent. And we in the dominant culture have a hard time understanding this.
Mm.
But we were exposed to it even actually, during the conquest phase. And the Jesuits were very clear in their writings that here they are, they're looking down. on the indigenous people of Turtle Island. And they're saying, yeah, but they don't have all the laws and things that we have, yet they don't have the violence. And, sure, things happen and then they make it right. They find a way to reconcile.
Yeah.
And so the missionaries felt safer amongst the indigenous people than they did back at home in Europe. And so we know that these things can work, but we keep having to but we try to get ourselves convinced that it won't. We couldn't live a different way. We're stuck with that. There is no alternative than this conquest consciousness capitalist thing. The only alternative is Stalin and murder, and that's ridiculous. So it's really so beautiful, and you can see them. It gives an indication of the meaning of treasure vase. This is a treasure. Peace is and happiness and healing are the treasure that we seek, and our intentions also are the great treasure. I
That's
always
right.
say that Kant and I don't like Kant that much, but Kant and Buddha agree that because Kant famously said there is nothing in this world or even beyond that is good without qualification except for a good will.
Mm.
And he believed that that was what marks the divine. The divine has a perfect will. Well, that's how Buddha is described, of course. Dharmakirti, it says the same thing. And that's what we get is bodhicitta is the perfection of will. It is the perfection of intention.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what is the sacred treasure that goes in there is people's bodhicitta, their way of expressing that perfect intention for
Mm-hmm.
peace and healing and wisdom
Yes.
and
Yes.
beauty and love and compassion. And so it seems to our mind that this couldn't possibly be, but that symbolic process kind of gets us out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's partly that there's an ecology of mind, not one person, but an ecology of mind, and that this liberates us from our more restricted vision. And people who are listening to the series on ecological thinking, this is what we're getting at too, this shift that we need. And I thought I might share a little thing from Jung. I don't know if you've ever come across this, Cynthia, but Jung, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he talks about visiting the United States, and he went to the Southwest. And he says, he writes, I once had a talk with one of the kind of elders of the tribe of Pueblo Indians. And he told me something very interesting. I'm going to put my spectacles on, everybody. He said, yes, we are a small tribe. And these Americans, they want to interfere with our religion. They should not do it because we are the sons of the Father, the Son, he who goes there. That is our Father. We must help him daily to rise over the horizon and walk over heaven. And we don't do it for ourselves only. We do it for all of America. We do it for the whole world. And if these Americans interfere with our religion through their missions, they will see something. In 10 years, Father Son won't rise anymore because we can't help him. And Jung says, now you may say this is madness. Not at all. He said, these people have their symbolic life and they have a much healthier life than we do. And it's very interesting because we've come to a place where if we look at human culture as we've known it, the sun may not rise on it if we don't change. So if we have this mistaken idea that literally the sun will get frozen in the sky, that's not necessarily what this means. It means that the sun won't come up over this life that we're used to because it will fall apart without this medicine of ritual and ceremony and meditation and prayer and intention. And this story so well illustrates the healing that rippled out from this activity of goodwill, the
Mm-hmm.
goodwill in action.
Mm-hmm.
It's really beautiful. I wonder if we could now, what I love is that you went to, is there a vase in Crete?
No, there was
Okay.
going to be a vase in Crete, but it ended up in Delphi.
Oh, no, I know that story, but I'm just thinking that in particular, because that's very appropriate, but maybe one day someone will do a ceremony in Crete because of the rich feminine tradition. It's
Yes.
such a land of the goddess, birthplace of the divine, a lot of power. And of course, the oldest footprints that we know of, human footprints, are in Crete because it used to be part of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So those footprints where they've recently verified this only within the past few years that they're much older than any other human footprint we've ever found. There they are on Crete. But what I love, maybe we can come to the story of Greece, because the beauty is that you and I then share a lineage spiritually, because my family are from Crete.
Yes.
So
Oh,
Nikos
uh-huh.
is a Greek name. Papadakis is a Greek last name. People with a KIS last name are usually from Crete in particular. You can often identify a Greek, their region, based on their last name.
Hmm.
So, but you went to a very special and powerful place, and then discovered there was another visionary experience. You had many visionary experiences along the way, and this whole thing was a visionary process. But maybe can you share a little bit about the vision you had in Greece?
Yeah. I actually have a sister who's married to a Greek, and their family name is Papadakis. So,
Very close, very close. All right,
yeah,
they're from the same island somehow.
somewhere in there. Yeah, so Greek culture and Greece itself is a beloved place to me. I was there a lot as a younger person, but hadn't been back in a long time, and felt very, very called to wanting to take one of the Earth Treasure vases to Greece, and had planned a pilgrimage to Crete, actually. And so, yes, I hope somebody will someday do that. But in fact, what happened was that I learned a lot more about Delphi over the course of time, because we were planning to go to Crete before COVID, and then we had to cancel that. And then I had a lot of time to really reflect on where this vase really wanted to go. And you know, Delphi is the birthplace of Gaia. So since this practice is really an offering to Gaia, and a practice that is allowing us to form a relationship to Gaia, that has, for me, um, evolved over the course of these last 30 years as I have applied myself to it. And maybe I can say a little bit more about the practice of Gaia that has come to me too. But in any case, when I learned the history, the original history of Delphi as the site, not of the Oracle of Apollo, but the Oracle of Delphi, I mean, excuse me, of Gaia, that originally the wisdom that was being imparted from this incredible pilgrimage place was coming right up out of the earth herself, and it was being transmitted through her priestesses to those who would seek her guidance. And then what happened, you know, is as has happened everywhere around the world. This is one of the core wounds that, if we're talking about global healing, must be addressed, and that is the desecration of the sacred feminine, and the the patriarchal takeover, for lack of better words, of sites and places where this power was naturally there. And this is one of those places. And you know, the Greek pantheon of gods and goddesses on Mount Olympus and all of that is a great example of power over. You know, bless them all, but power over was a force to be reckoned with. And you know, you see the the dynamics of that force um, being enacted in relationship to Mother Earth everywhere. You know, I mean, that you can't separate the rape of the earth from the rape of women, for example. And that's a, a, an issue that is everywhere around the world. So I wanted to go and make an offering to Gaia at Delphi, and to connect with that place from this point of view, you know, and to say thank you. You know, I mean, the story is amazing, the myths and stories of that place. But in any case, what happened for me when I went there, I don't know whether I've actually really shared this story much publicly. I do write about it. Um, so um, I'm just dropping into that experience a little more deeply in order to share it with you from my heart. There have been a couple of times along the way where I have thought to myself, oh, I think something's gonna happen here. I don't know what it is, but I think something's gonna happen here, but I don't know what it is. That Australia was another one of those um, pilgrimages that turned out to just be life changing. They all have been, but in any case, we were on our way. I took a group. This was only in last year, 2023. We gathered. It was an amazing group, amazing pilgrimage, and we had finally arrived to Delphi. We were staying up on top of Mount Parnassus above Delphi, which was really wonderful, and came down the hill. And I started having these kind of like sensations on my face, like tickling. I've never had that before, but anyway, it was very much getting my attention, like something's happening here. What is this energetic kind of awakening, really? And I couldn't shake it, so I was just really very much with myself. And we stopped at the spring. If you know Delphi at all, there's a spring that is where people would take the waters to purify themselves before going to see the oracle. And then the place that we went to start is a place. It's called the Temple of Athena Pronea, and it's below the main site of Delphi. And it's it is such a beautiful spot. There's a round temple there that is unusual. Most of the temples in ancient Greece were not round. There's just a few of them, and it got my attention. Then so I sat down and I had the treasure vase with me. These places are covered with guards. They don't like you to do anything unusual or ceremonial. Like it's like they'll stop you in your tracks, so you have to be very careful. Anyway, we all kind of dispersed to meditate in the space and just absorb the feeling of being there and whatever it was, whatever messages were going to come. And so I came and I started crying when I encountered this temple, and moved closer to it, and got up real close to the stones, and was sitting there. And all of a sudden it was like I was just looking through this vast portal of time, and it was like everything just kind of fell away from this reality, and I was looking into the ancient past. And I saw myself in that temple. I mean, I didn't, I knew it was me, but I mean, it wasn't like me. It was just this experience of connecting um, to the experience of having been a priestess to Gaia, dedicated to her, um, and carrying out all of the ceremonies to maintain balance and harmony in relationship to Mother Earth, and filled with devotion to that purpose. And I just was flooded with it was incredibly healing, really, because it was like this lifetime, everything that I've done, to try so much to restore that relationship in my life and in the life of the world. And so there I was, like, God, I mean, and this is Western civilization. So I've spent years and years in Eastern, spiritual cultures. This was like the Dharma door opening into my own Western roots, and kind of like really claiming or connecting with that. And so then it was as if time was just kind of You know, time was elastic, and I realized that the time that this was taking place, that I was seeing into, was actually the time when the patriarchal system was coming in and and taking over from this um, way of living that was had been carried out for such a long time, but whose time was over. And they were coming in force to destroy that way of being, and to take power over. And they were first coming with their seduction, and then they were coming with their swords, and then they were coming with their guns, and they were, you know, destroying the relationship to nature in the process of claiming their power and greed. And it was so devastating to witness this. And I just, you know, like I was weeping to feel the impact of what that was, and then the repercussions over time of how this has just gone on and on and on. And back then, you know, as this priestess of this temple, you know, I was very aware that there was no stopping it. You know, like it was over. And but all I could do and all we could do was just continue as best we could to keep it alive as best as we can, and to pass it on, you know, like to hope for the best. You know, just it's like, if you or any of your listeners are aware of the Kogi people in the mountains of Colombia. They were the ones who gave this warning, and still are trying to get our attention to go, you know, you guys, this is not okay. And anyway, so, you know, these, it just has gone on for so long. And I realized that this was that my motivation in this life has been fulfilling a vow that I made then. I mean, I don't know if it was, I don't know how to interpret these kinds of experiences exactly, but that these times that we're living in today are calling us forth, many, many, many of us, to reclaim our sacred connection to the earth, and to remember the ceremonies and the rituals and the way of being in right relationship to all of life and the diversity of life and to the web of life and all of that, you know, that is unraveling right before our very eyes, you know. And if we have eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart that cares, then we are being called. That's why my book is called Summoned by the Earth, you know. And so here we are. Here we are
Yeah.
to with this incredible opportunity to make it right, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's partly why I read that passage from Jung, because it's a mirror of that same moment, that
Mhm.
when it happened here on Turtle Island,
Yeah,
and people just continuing to try to do these ceremonies because they knew that it matters. We have a hard time understanding how it matters because of the limitations of our science. I had Dean Radin on in a former episode, past episode, when we talked about the power of distant healing intention.
mhm.
There again, the treasure of intention that
Yes.
he demonstrated even by the lights of dominant culture science, that a healing intention has an effect when it shouldn't, according to the paradigm. But
Right.
when you measure it, you find it. And it's a remarkable thing that this is an ancestral lineage that comes from the dominant culture. What's I think so valuable there is to remember that we were indigenous, and we
Right.
can re-indigenize, and that it's coming from that place where you felt that ancient connection. Being Greek, you know, I have a sense of it too. The first time I went to the Mediterranean, I was shocked how moved I was feeling the nested motherliness that the Mediterranean was like a mother,
Mhm.
and that but that she's nested in Gaia as the larger mother, just the profound connection where I just sensed
Yeah.
how much life-giving energy.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful the way that you touched it. And again, too, I like this resonance. I often say that the Vimalakirti Sutra is so important right now because Gaia is Vimalakirti,
Mhm.
summoning us to her sickbed, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's what happens when these people won't admit that they don't know, right? And they're supposed to be sages, but Vimalakirti knows they don't know. And so they're uncomfortable not knowing, just like we are, if we, especially in the dominant culture, if technology can't solve it, forget it. But we're not in a space where technology is going to do it. It will
Mhm.
just create powered samsara, right?
Mhm.
So that's all we're going to get if our visionaries remain Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. But Gaia is saying, no, come to my sickbed and let me give you the teachings. And you did it. You
Yes.
lived that. It's
Yes.
so beautiful. So can you share as a closing? So it's so great. I just want to acknowledge again now our deep kinship. You're Greek. And we have to remember that the dominant culture is in some way Greek. It's not, I mean, it's so complicated because, look, people today have, I don't know, I probably have more in common with I don't know. I mean, are we really like, connected? There's such a weird way in which we aren't, and there's a weird way in which we are. But the culture is not just Judeo-Christian, it's also Greek. It has been deeply influenced by that culture. So, and I don't know if you know the Harrisons, but Newton Harrison has this beautiful video on the Mediterranean and about how she's asking us for healing. So, I
Mm.
mean, if anybody out there is listening and you want to get together and fund a pilgrimage to Crete and the Mediterranean and do an earth phase ceremony, I'm on board because I think the Mediterranean, that whole region, and we see there's war still, there's ecological catastrophes, there's the olive trees are suffering, right? That's Athena's gift to us.
Mhm.
There's all this, and we all have an influence there, whether we're from the dominant culture or not. That region has influenced us so profoundly.
Mhm.
Okay, so, but let's close with your vision of Gaia and the Gaia mantra.
Mm.
Whatever you want to say about that, definitely share the mantra, and then anything else you want to say, please. I'd love to hear it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this journey has been so, so, so profound. And during the course of all of it, I really, like I said, I began to form a relationship with the earth that was, like my guru, really. And also my sort of disillusionment with the guru system was also uh, crumbling around my ankles as well. And I love the teaching so much, but the system that through which they're being passed on is problematic in these times. So many of the systems are. So I do write about that, but I had been practicing with Tara for a long time, and she's a beautiful ally. And and then because I had formed this intention over time to have this direct relationship to Gaia as my guru, in a sense, um, one day, unbidden by me, I wasn't trying to make anything happen here, but um, the practice that I was doing of Tara began to evolve into a practice of Gaia. And I began to see her, differently as the goddess that she is. And the first thing that came really was this mantra, and it was a new mantra. It was a mantra to Gaia, and I was just speechless. So I went outside and made offerings, and bowed down, and came back and started reciting this mantra. And the more I would do that, the more the visualization began to evolve. And so I took the liberty of modifying the text that was the basis of the practice of Tara that I had done into a practice of the sublime Mother Gaia. And it took a long time of practicing with her before I felt I could share it. And I was also told by the lamas, like, yeah, they're not like, who are you and what is this? And this isn't from the lineage. And, um, maybe you better practice it for 3 lifetimes before you start teaching it. Stuff
Maybe
like that.
Yeshe Sogal put it in your mind stream, or
Who
maybe
knows?
Princess Mandarava. So maybe it's a Torma.
Maybe so. I don't know. I
That's
don't
beautiful.
know, but this is my experience.
Yeah.
So it happened, and finally, and there's a story in the book I won't go into, but I went back to Nepal to the cave where this all began, and I had been made a lama during that trip, and I was very conflicted about it because I didn't know that I was going to be able to uphold the lineage teachings in the way that was expected. And I fell off the mountain. I literally fell head over heels, and it was a near death experience. And when I sort of, I had to reflect on it a lot because I didn't know what had happened. But anyway, I realized that it was the earth who stopped me from dying, and it wasn't Tara, and it wasn't Guru Rinpoche or anybody else. It was the earth, and that I had fallen off the path, but that I had to get up and claim this new path that is for me, uh, taking the earth or Gaia as the great teacher of our times, to calling us to awaken in relationship to her, but also to each other. In these are the times for a collective awakening, because we're not gonna, there's not gonna be the one, Buddha, Christ, whatever, whoever it is, gonna do it for us anymore. So that was a great awakening for me. And so I began then to teach this practice. So I do teach it, and I will be teaching it in September in New York. But the mantra is something that is a beautiful thing to know. Just if you are interested in having a little anchor, into her, to know this mantra. Um, I heard from someone who learned it from somebody else, like how things get out. This was a woman in Germany who doesn't even know how to operate on the internet, but she found a way to contact me, and she said she learned this mantra in a woman's march in Germany, and it was the best thing that ever happened to that women's march, was learning this mantra, so that song.
Mm.
So when I first taught it for the first time, there was a woman in the group who is a singer, and she's got a history and a connection to um, the Tibetan teachings, and the mantras are often sung. So she came up with a beautiful tune for the mantra. So you can recite it just as a mantra, with your mala, or just reciting it over and over like that, or you can sing it. And the mantra is like this: Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brum Ah. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brum Ah. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brum Ah.
And can you tell us what it means and then give us the tune?
Yeah. So Om, is the sound of all that is. Let's just leave it at that. Gaia, we know who Gaia is. Om Gaia Mandala, this incredible web of life, this mandala. Siddhi are the spiritual powers that arise through our deep devotion and dedication. Siddhi Pala are the fruits of the practice, or of those siddhis. Like when we when we have those experiences of ripening, you know, of seeing as it is, of being of the clarity of like, aha, that's it, you know. Siddhi Pala, broom is the seed syllable for the earth element in Sanskrit, broom. Siddhi Pala broom, ah, another sound of primordial wisdom, awareness, the sound ah. Om, ah, hung, the three primary Sanskrit syllables representing the body, speech, and mind. So ah is the syllable in the throat for speech. Om is in the, you know, they say this is the this is the this is the this is where the mind really is here. But anyway, head, heart, head, throat, and heart. So Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brahm Ah. And the song is like this. If you want to do it with me, you can turn your sound off so we don't have a conflict, but you can join me. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brahm Ah. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brahm Ah. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brahma. Om Gaia Mandala Siddhi Pala Brahma.
That's so wonderful. So wonderful. That's the treasure. That's the earth treasure too. It's so beautiful. And you planted these beautiful seeds. I wanted to close by, again, I want to tell everybody to read this book. It's a really beautiful book, and luminary people have spoken glowingly. Of course, Bob Thurman, my friend Bob was on here on the podcast, and Bob and also Lama Tsultrim, who wrote about the mandala and the Tara practice, but also the Buddha families, and David Abram, you know him, Joanna Macy, Mirabai Starr, many kind of respected intellectuals, Jack Cornfield. And so it's not that we have to appeal to borrowed authority, but these are people I respect. And if you read this book, everybody, you'll be on a beautiful adventure. I also want to recommend people to think about contacting you. We'll have the link, several links. You're going to be teaching this teaching, but you have other teachings. And I want to honor Dogen. You know, the Buddhist traditions have a lot of ecological thinking, and arguably Buddha was an eco-philosopher. Sometimes people don't see it that way, but we have to remember that the gold standard for knowledge for Buddha was you go out into the wilderness and sit quietly with the earth. So that's the gold standard. How do you know something? You go into the nature and you sit there, and you don't let yourself be separate anymore. So then Dogen had the famous dialogue he liked to cite, which was that the student says to the teacher, "Teacher, how do you turn the mountains, rivers, and great earth and return to the self?" And the teacher said, "How do you turn the self and return to mountains, rivers, and the great earth?" And so I think that's partly what we're trying to see here is that way. That sometimes we like to say the way out is in, but also the way in is out. We have to also be able to say it that way. That's even the Plum Village podcast, right? The way out is in,
That's right.
but it's also the way in is out. That Buddha really discovered that. So thank you for showing us the way, the good way, a way, right? Because the way is each of us has a way, and each of us has a treasure, and each of us is a treasure vase. And you really show that. And these vases are such beautiful medicine, so everybody can learn more about it. And would you have any final thoughts that you would like to share? It's a dumb way to end. I don't know why sometimes I end that way by saying, do you have any final thoughts? But sometimes people have a thing. No, there's the thing I always like to say at the end. And so
Oh,
if you have that thing, you have it.
no, I don't. I think we've really said it, but I was going to say, what I was going to say is that we do a meditation every full moon. I think you mentioned it.
Yeah.
That is the practice of the treasure vase global healing mandala. And we invoke all the locations where the treasure vases have gone,
Hmm.
and we imagine our prayers going out around the planet to relieve suffering and to bring the restoration of balance and harmony in the world. And we often start the call with whoever is stewarding a treasure vase into a particular location so that we can bring our intention to that part of the world. Or we hear a story of what happened when one was taken. Um, and so it's a beautiful gathering that happens every full moon, and it's very uplifting. Even though the world is coming apart at the seams, it's a beautiful way to strengthen our collective awakening and
Yeah.
our collective call for healing. So that the link to register for that and learn about more is on the website. So thanks for sharing that with everyone,
Yeah.
Nikos.
Definitely. And there you have it again, that intention, this idea. And we have the empirical data. It's just, Jung was speaking about it psychologically, just that he saw the power of this, the healing power of this symbolic work that we do, because we
Mhm.
think the symbol is somehow something artificial, but the world is symbolic and meaningful. It's operating on the basis of meaning. And when we do these meaningful things, we are affecting what we think of as just a material. How can we affect it? But we do.
We do.
And
Yeah.
so we just have to, if you need the evidence, you look up Dean Radin's work. He's shown it again and again. But these spiritual traditions do these things because they know about the efficacy of it.
Mhm.
So again, I can't thank you enough. It's really, thank you. Your practice of life is so profound and beautiful. Wonderful Bodhisattva. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And thanks to all of you for joining us. If you have questions, reflections, stories to share related to anything we discuss, please send them in through dangerouswisdom.org. We might be able to bring some of them into a future contemplation. Until then, this is Dr. Nikos, your friendly neighborhood soul doctor, reminding you that your soul and the soul of the world are not two things. Take good care of them.